thank you for coming to our intimate group today. Please welcome our speaker today, Brad Van Voorhees, who is the Senior Manager at the Supply Chain Sustainability for VF Corporation. And this is the biggest apparel and footwear company, which owns North Face, Wrangler, Timberland, Lee, and Vans. I'm sure you all know the brand. And his job entails engaging in the four critical areas, which are energy efficiency, sustainable cotton, wastewater, and the HIC index, which is the environment and social measurement tool. And in his daily work, he engaged regularly with the NGO, local government, various stakeholders to ensure that via sustainability objective are met. So please welcome.
Thank you, Moon. Thank you guys for having me. I'm really honored to be here. It's will be a pleasure to speak with all of you guys after, and hopefully you guys enjoy learning a little bit about VF Corporation, what we do, and particularly what sustainability at VF is doing, and my team, which is called Responsible Sourcing. So we'll give a brief introduction, but just to follow up on that, I focus on energy efficiency, sustainable cotton procurement, wastewater, and something called the HIG index. And the HIG index, it essentially, it's a number of different brands coming together, which represents about 40% of the apparel and footwear sector. And we are creating something very similar to what food has on their packaging, which are nutrition fact labels. So on food, you generally know, excuse me, how much sugar is in the product, how much fat, etc. So we're doing that for the apparel industry as well. It'll say, where the factory that produced the product is made, how environmentally sustainable it is, how it treats the workers, etc., etc. So these are all the things I'm working on, but today I want to talk specifically about the Better Cotton Initiative, which is a sustainable cotton standard that VF has aligned with in order to address our very large cotton footprint. Great, thank you. So, does everyone know what VF Corporation is? Does anyone not know VF Corporation? Okay, at least a couple. So VF is the largest branded apparel company in the world, and we're the third largest footwear company in the world. We've got a pretty large footprint. We've got more than 30 brands. Here are a selection of some of our brands. You probably know, maybe not so much here in Thailand, but the North Face, we make a lot of outerwear, jackets, ski jackets, Vans, sneakers. We own Timberland. Over here, over here we have Majestic. This makes all the baseball uniforms in the United States. We have Bulwark, which makes police uniforms, customs agents uniforms. Horace Small does kitchenware and hotel uniforms. So we really span the apparel industry in a number of different categories. So by the numbers, we have about 59,000 employees at VF. Those are in a number of different segments of the business, whether they're in corporate. Each of the brands operates rather autonomously. So as an example, our Timberland brand, their headquarters is in New Hampshire, where it's always been. Most of those employees think of themselves as Timberland employees. The North Face is just outside of San Francisco, and then we have corporate, and we have supply chain, which generally is in Asia, predominantly in Hong Kong. And we have about 30 factories that we own around the world. A lot of them are in Mexico and Central America, also in Egypt, Turkey, and a lot of our employees of that 59,000 comes from our factories that we own. We're about 12.3 billion in revenue as of 2014. We're on a growth trajectory to be 17 billion by 2017, or surpass that. So we're growing quite quickly. We're actively looking for acquisitions right now. We're looking within our industry in the apparel and footwear segment. we're also looking outside of our business as well for brands that we can purchase. Besides acquisition, our organic growth is very, very strong. So, all in all, huge company, and in turn, we have quite a large environmental footprint, which we need to address. So, we were looking at a number of different places that we need to address our environmental footprint. A lot of those fall under my responsibility or under my team's responsibility. Energy efficiency, wastewater, also cotton. Cotton, and I'm going to start to talk about it now, has a huge impact in terms of its growth. There's around 20 million metric tons of cotton grown per year. It's grown in 85 countries, and around 250 million people's lives are directly tied to cotton production. So that's farmers and their families. A lot of smallholder farmers grow cotton all over the world. So not so much here in Thailand, but China, India, which is the #1 grower of cotton in the world, Pakistan. These are all countries that have smallholder farmers. Then in the US, Australia, Brazil, generally speaking, we have more commercial-sized farms, producing a very large portion of the overall cotton by a very small number of people. Whereas in the rest of the world, particularly China, you'll see that there's a lot of people growing a much smaller portion of the annual cotton yield. So about 2.4% of the world's agricultural land is for cotton. But at the same time, about 11% of the world's insecticide is used for the growth of cotton. And this number is quite staggering, I think. And 24% of the world's pesticide is used on cotton. Yet at the same time, 2.4% of what we grow is cotton. So, I mean, the ratio between these, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. It's a very intensive crop. 73% of cotton is grown using irrigated land as opposed to rain-fed. It uses a huge amount of fresh water, a huge amount. So at VF, we purchase annually, indirectly, about 1% of the entire world's cotton every year. If you think about some of those brands that we have, Wrangler, Lee, they are huge denim companies. In fact, we're the largest denim producer in the entire world. And that's just one of the segments within the apparel industry that is very cotton intensive. Shirts, uniforms, etc. So we use a huge amount of cotton. It's about 200,000 metric tons, and we're affecting about 2.5 million people indirectly. I say indirectly, VF doesn't actually purchase any cotton directly themselves. Generally speaking, it's spinners that will buy the cotton, or fabric mills that will then buy yarn or also cotton. So when thinking about this huge impact of cotton, we talked about how we can address the issue. And we tried to really define where within the cotton sector the issue lies. And the first that we want to address is the environmental footprint. We want to address that huge amount of insecticide, the huge amount of chemicals that are going into it. We want to address social conditions. I mentioned there's a lot of smallholder farmers. They have a very tough life, and we want to help contribute to improving their livelihood. And an economic livelihood of these smallholder farmers as well. So I'd say, all in all, we're looking at both the lives of farmers and their impact on the environment. So, in the cotton sector, there's essentially 3 different mainstream sustainable cotton standards. The first one you see here is organic. I'm sure you guys all know organic. The second one is fair trade. I assume you all know fair trade as well, but as an example, fair trade coffee is what Starbucks will buy, generally speaking. And then there's BCI, which is, of these three, it's the newest standard, and it's called the Better Cotton Initiative. So I'm going to show you how the three of them sort of stack up against each other, and why at VF we chose to align ourselves with the Better Cotton Initiative. This first column here, it represents chemical use. As you can see, organic cotton, it does not allow any chemical use. No chemicals, no pesticides. Fair trade, it's reducing chemical use. And BCI, also actively reducing chemical and pesticide use. So, for us, many people would say, well, okay, clearly then organic is the right decision here. We looked at this and we recognize the environmental footprint of having these chemicals involved. But at the same time, half the battle here is also the economic and social livelihood of farmers. And so it's really hard to say that we don't want to use any chemicals or any pesticides at all. One example is if a farm has a fungus, or a cotton farm has a fungus infestation, what is the farmer going to do if they can't use chemicals and pesticides? They don't have a lot of options. And if their entire crop is destroyed by a chemical or a fungus infestation, that means that their entire year's income is completely gone. So we see that as a bit of a detriment. This is the use of water. So organic and fair trade, they both take a neutral stance. Farmers use as little or as much water as they need. BCI, which we think is really important, is actively reducing the amount of water. So as an example, in India, farmers often will employ flood farming. They just flood their field. That's how they water it. BCI will teach the farmers to use something like drip irrigation, or teaches them methods that can really reduce the amount of fresh water that they're using. This is economic livelihood. Organic cotton, it sells for a premium. So if you buy an organic cotton shirt, it's probably going to be more expensive than just a conventional cotton shirt. However, in order to become an organic cotton farmer, there's a 3-year process that a farmer needs to go through to go from conventional cotton to organic. And during that period, we call it transitional period, they're not making any more money for their cotton, and they're putting a lot of extra work in, and their yield, the amount of cotton that they're actually able to sell at the end of the year, is reduced significantly. Fair trade, just like fair trade coffee, it has a direct subsidy to the farmer. You buy a shirt for 1,000 baht, a portion of that money goes directly to the farmer. It doesn't go by way of middlemen, it goes directly to the farmer. That's the fair trade process works. What BCI does is it helps farmers reduce their inputs, and it helps them become more efficient. So reduce the amount of chemicals that you're buying, reduce the amount of pesticides that you're buying, choose the right seeds for your land, and improve your overall yield. So the amount of money you spend to grow the cotton goes down, and the amount of cotton that you grow goes up. Ultimately, you're going to have greater revenue and greater bottom line. And then lastly, this stands for scalability. So in the world, the total cotton yield, less than 1% of the world's cotton together is fair trade and organic. I mentioned earlier that VF buys approximately 1% of the world's cotton ourselves. So there's almost not enough organic cotton and fair trade cotton in the entire world to support our needs on an annual basis. That's not to mention the fact that both of those, organic and fair trade, are more expensive, and how that would ultimately damage our business. So just solely in terms of scalability and wanting to make a large impact, there's not enough. BCI, as of this past year, represents about 12% of the annual cotton yield, and it will surpass 15% by the end of this harvest, which is around November or December. The goal of BCI is to represent 30% of the entire world's cotton yield by 2020. So we're now on track to have a sustainable cotton standard that companies like VF, Nike, Adidas, Levi's, that we all can use, and we're not all forcing the price of it up because there's so much demand for cotton types that aren't able to yield enough cotton for us, such as organic. Feel free to interrupt or raise your hand if you have any questions about any of this. I think, rather than forget the question and at the end, I'd rather answer it now. So please feel free to interject at any time.
See about the pricing, you say organic fair trade is more expensive to grow, but if I remember myself well in the whole apparel market, especially the brand name apparel market, which represents a lot, the production cost, that's including buying the cotton or whatever other yarn or something you need, and the actual retail price that is just very far apart. So how much effect has a 20% cost, when it's higher cost of cotton, how much would that affect the actual retail price for the consumer? I think if the rest of the chain maybe be willing to lower the margin slightly, you can actually get that a bit cheaper. It's because
Sure.
most of the cost of the retail of this product is the actual brand name marketing cost. You hire a famous sports star for $50 million. That's what you pay. You don't pay for the content cost.
Right. I would agree. Generally speaking, the largest percentage of the overall margin made is coming from the design and the branding and the marketing, etc. Now, trying to force costs down to a very complex supply chain is incredibly difficult. So, one thing that with BCI, we're trying to ensure that it remains cost neutral. So throughout the supply chain, it remains cost neutral, and all the benefits are directed towards the farmer. Even doing that is very difficult in a complex supply chain. After the cotton grows, it then goes to a gin, and the gin has to take the cotton seeds out of it, and then from the gin, it gets sold generally to a spinner, who spins it into a yarn, and it goes to a mill, then to a dye house. Even with something like BCI, you find that every step along the way, someone is trying to find opportunity or be opportunistic to increase their margin. So trying to, as a brand like VF, trying to have reduce our margin, as an example, and pass that margin then back to the farmer is very difficult because of the complexity of the supply chain. Now, if you look at fair trade, that's the model that you directly subsidize the farmers. But we look at it as, you can't force the horse to drink, rather lead them to the water. I think I got that analogy wrong, but hopefully you understood what I meant. We'd rather teach you to fish than give you fish, is what I'm saying.
So I just want to clarify, so everything that you're doing because it's the right thing to do, but it's really not creating any benefit financially for you.
No, it's not. In fact, we invest quite a lot of money into this project. So we spend around 200,000 euros just in terms of our fees and direct subsidies to farmers. That doesn't include all the time that we spend hosting events, working with farmers, setting up, cost of our employees, time, etc. Right now, unlike organic and fair trade, BCI cotton, you're not allowed to market it on the product. So we can't make a shirt that says, this shirt is made from BCI cotton. The standard hasn't got there yet. They're working on developing it. They want to do it in a credible way. But for the last 3.5, 4 years that we've been working on this, we don't market it at all.
So your benefit is what? Do you have any benefits from this other than feeling good about it, which is wonderful, but does the company benefit in any way?
Financial benefits? No.
but social maybe, or being known as a company that cares? Or?
Well, I mean, I think, times are really shifting. We have all the way up from our CEO, and we have incredible support, throughout the organization, incredible support. People want to do the right thing. I mean, there are benefits to doing this, whether that's employee retention, for example. I mean, people want to work for a company that's doing the right thing. That's just the reality of where we are right now. I mean, I'm not going to work for a company that's not doing the right thing.
Sorry to interrupt. Let's
Speed it up.
yeah, because we have 10 minutes left. I'm afraid you're not
10
going to have
minutes?
time for the questions.
Okay, let's speed it up. Actually, I'm going to pop on a quick 5-minute video. I think it's much more interesting than me just talking. It shows really what's going on.
Most important materials for VF, but it's also one of the most impactful on the environment. We buy indirectly 200,000 metric tons of cotton a year. It's about 1% of the entire world's yield of cotton. So we needed to find a sustainable solution, and Better Cotton provides that solution for VF.
Better Cotton Initiative is a non-profit membership organization. It is a collective effort made by brands and retailers, suppliers and manufacturers and producer organizations to make contribution to the sustainable development of cotton sector.
VF met with 4 key denim mills here in northern China to backtrack through their supply chain to find the cotton farmers producing their cotton. We selected Xindadong, which is one of our main denim mills, located in Hebei province in China, as they had a lot of knowledge of their cotton supply chain. They brought us to Zhudu County. These smallholder farmers, 0.3 hectares of land on average, really family farmers that are producing cotton for them every year. VF decided to invest directly in a project linked with our supply chain. So we selected Solidaridad, a well-respected NGO from the Netherlands, and also a key implementing partner of Better Cotton projects around the world.
Solidaridad is a network organization dedicated to promoting sustainable trade. We invest intensive efforts offering this hands-on support to producers, and we also make efforts to help farmers develop these linkages to a more favorable markets.
We met with the local Bureau of Agriculture. We explained Better Cotton and the Better Cotton principles to them, and it matched closely with their directives from the central government.
We have to organize the smallholders into different learning groups because we cannot train every single farmer, smallholder. There are hundreds, thousands of them. That's the direct target group of Solidaridad.
So in the training sessions that are being conducted by our key agricultural experts, they're teaching farmers today on pesticide use and on insects. So there are a lot of environmental benefits of Better Cotton for farmers and producers. They're reducing the amount of water they're using, energy, and the key chemicals that they're putting on their crops.
So we are organizing the whole project by offering them these training sessions, workshops. What's more important is we offer them this in the field, on-site technical support.
我是新店庄村的人，我是个农民，就是种棉花，在种地吧。啊，行吧，这个活动挺好的。这个科学家们吧，就是教育我们这个什么有这个害虫和益虫的区别，还有这个地里种庄稼的这个好处。知道了以后，这个种棉花是什么管理？ 土壤什么的一个运用，还有这个环境什么的，保护环境什么运用，环境这个。
Implementation of the Better Cotton farming principles have resulted in an optimal cotton crop here in Hebei, and now it's ready for harvest.
exists to grow cotton, better for the people who grow it, better for the environment it grows in, and better for the sector's future.
This year, we estimate that our project will impact 900 farmers in 8 different villages, but it will grow to impact 4,000 farmers in 18 villages in the next 3 years. At VF, we're passionate about finding sustainable solutions and improving the lives of our suppliers. Better cotton is just one of the ways we're going about doing that.
So I didn't mention that in addition to buying better cotton, we actually have a farm in China, which you just saw in the video. It has about 4,000 farmers that we directly subsidize to help teach them how to grow better cotton and the better cotton principles. So we have, what's that? We have a few minutes for questions, or I mean, we can leave a presentation of this.
Sure.
Yeah, and we can go to questions, and if there's no questions, then we'll finish up the last couple slides.
Okay, anybody has a question now?
Yeah.
Yes. I am from Asian Institute of Technology and doing my PhD on same BCI initiative from Pakistan.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Amazing.
And I went into the field and I saw that a lot of investment has to be made in training the farmers and all the NGOs which get funds from there. So I wonder from where the money comes from. You said that your company is investing a lot, but as a business company, you must be expecting something. So how we can recover that money, or we can, from where all the funds will come from?
So the funding for BCI, there's some very large donors. Rabobank Foundation from the Netherlands, Solidaridad, which was mentioned, is also a large funder of the project. IDH, which is the Sustainable Trade Initiative, again from the Netherlands, from Utrecht. They're funding a large portion of it. Additionally, various brands make contributions to the initiative based on, first they have member fees, but then additionally they've been making various contributions. So IKEA is the largest donor of any of the brands, followed by I think Nike, and we're one of the top 5 as well. Now, in order to make this a self-sustaining or self-funded mechanism, they've created something called the volume-based fee. The volume-based fee essentially is for every kilo or metric ton that you procure, you then need to pay a small fee for it. So every year, in perpetuity, VF will continue to pay based on how much we use. Now, we hope that as more and more brands join, and as it becomes more readily available, that the price is going to come down, right? So the amount that we pay BCI to maintain the organization, to teach the farmers, etc., we hope that price will come down. It's pretty high right now on a per kilo basis. As of right now, we have there's no direct correlation between what we pay into this and the direct output in terms of return on investment. It's, we see it as critical to really changing the cotton sector, which is one of our primary raw materials. Does that help answer your question, or?
Yes, it is helping, but this volume-based fee you're mentioning, I visited all the supply chain in Pakistan, how it goes, but I didn't see that. I'm not sure if it's being applied right now or it's in the future plans.
It's being applied. It started as of last year. So only the retail brand, like VF, Nike, Levi's, IKEA, we pay the volume-based fee. The supply chain does not pay it. Supply chain players, as an example, mills, they do have fees in order to become a member of BCI. That gives them access to working with brands like us. The fees are not huge. It's based on their annual revenue, but they don't pay that volume-based fee. So if they're buying, if they're buying 50,000 metric tons of cotton per year, they're not paying a volume-based fee on that. Only the brands like us. And eventually, we're working on it, we will be able to communicate this work that we're doing to the consumer. Whether we communicate it on our website or on a hang tag on the product, we will eventually be able to. But it's something that we're still developing now.
You mentioned the huge use of pesticide and insecticides. How successful are you with this initiative in reducing?
Hugely successful. I wish I had the slide with me right now that showed, it's a very interesting slide, I'm sorry I don't, it shows how much inputs have been reduced, and it shows it based on country. So it's country specific, and that's the way that we compare the results. So we compare the results of Pakistan versus Pakistan, so 2014 yield versus 2013 yield Pakistan. We do it within China, 2013 versus 2014 yield and inputs. The way cotton is grown around the world is drastically different. You saw these smallholder farmers in the video. In the United States, we have on our cotton fields combines that use laser-guided technology to spray milliliters of insecticide onto the actual cotton plant. Most of these tractors are GPS driven. A farmer can sit in it and do absolutely nothing. They don't have to touch any controls once it's set. And the reason for that is because, and the reason we pushed the technology so far is it's not, originally it wasn't for sustainability. It was for cost savings. When you have thousands of acres of land and you start to multiply your insecticide use across all of that land, all of a sudden it's very costly. So in the US, we've engineered it to the point that we use laser-guided technology to spray insecticide at the base of each cotton plant in the exact right location. Now in China, for example, and India, for example, many of these farmers, they receive loans from pesticide and insecticide companies. They use those loans to buy their fertilizers, to buy their seeds. Perhaps if they need additional workforce to pick the cotton, they use that loan as well. One of the provisions within those loans, one of the clauses, requires them to buy a certain amount of insecticide or pesticide from the company, right? So the chemical company says, we'll give you a loan, but you must buy this many gallons or liters of our product. Most of these farmers, they're not educated, and they just assume that the amount that the company tells them to buy or requires them to buy should be used in entirety across their fields. That's not the case. In fact, by using so much of the pesticide, it hampers the growth of the plant, and so their yield is smaller, and in turn their profit is going to be smaller. So the reduction, I'm sorry to a very long-winded answer about this, but their reduction in pesticides can be up to 70% or more. So huge amounts. 50 to 70% that's normal in China, particularly in the east coast of China. The west coast is larger corporations, but east coast of China, India, Pakistan, many of the countries in Africa in which we're also doing this project, and elsewhere in the world. But those countries, between 30 and 70% is very normal.
My research also found similar things like this. 50% reduction in rainwater use also. Because of this vertical initiative, in Pakistan what they do is, similarly as mentioned in India, they flood the field for water. But for this initiative, they encourage them to use in ridges, so that saves a lot of water also.
Ridges or drip irrigation.
Any other benefits apart from the environmental or in consumer like or using the recycled fiber?
For the end consumer?
Yeah, like
not really for the end consumer. So So actually, if you were to do DNA analysis on conventional cotton versus BCI cotton, there's no way that a scientist or the foremost researcher can tell the difference between BCI and conventional.
Would you like the pesticide and actually what seed?
I mean, not that I'm aware of. In fact, even with organic, I mean, by the time that the garment has been processed, so through the spinning process, the milling process, the washing and laundry process, I mean, I don't think it has really any impact on the human body as far as we're aware. Maybe that's up for debate. I'm not sure. I'm not going to debate on it though. But generally speaking, BCI cotton and what we call conventional cotton, they're identical. The difference is that it's grown with less chemicals, less pesticides. The farmers are taught that once they spray pesticides, don't let your children go run in the field. The farmers are taught to keep their pesticides locked away so that their children or others can't touch it. They're taught things that we might think are sort of common knowledge or something we should all just know, but they haven't been doing. So this is the idea, and it's a process of continuous improvement. That's what the better for better cotton stands for. Always getting better, continuous improvement.
So all your products are BCI?
Are our products BCI? So last year, 3% of our cotton was better cotton. So only 3%. This year, about 12% of our total cotton will be BCI. I hope by the end of 2016, we're around 25%. Partially because our brands are asking for it, partially because at the supply chain level, at my role, we're pushing for it, and then also partially because year over year, the amount of better cotton in the world is increasing drastically. So as I said, by 2020, around 30% of the world's cotton yield should be BCI, which will make it much easier for us to get it into our products. Right now, it's, even at about 12% of the world's yield, it's still very tricky. It requires a lot of negotiation, a lot of meetings, ensuring that the mills know how to follow the procedure. It's not just, this is what we want, and now give it to us. They have to follow procedure and ensure that actually they're giving us what they say they are. As an example with organic, last year in India, there was 100,000 metric tons of organic cotton grown, but there was 400,000 metric tons of organic cotton sold. So that means that there's a lot of fake organic cotton in the marketplace in India. So there's a lot of procedures in place to ensure traceability, that we know that in fact it's coming from a BCI licensed or certified farm and it's getting into our products.
So from a consumer standpoint, if I want to spend my money, make a difference, and there are so many, just like with food, there are so many different labels that you find out what it is. And as you said, it could even be fake or it could be nothing, it could be very diluted. How can we do a research? Or is there a resource to see what's real and what a label means?
For cotton specifically or in general?
Well, in general, or for your industry. If I see something on the label and you're trying to say you're a more righteous company and socially, doing the right thing, how do I know that that's true?
That's a good question. As someone who's in the industry and in this piece of the industry, even I have a hard time, following all these labels. I was just speaking on the same topic at the Sustainable Brands Conference in San Diego a few months ago, and literally every sort of third speaker or fourth, they were showing a new label and a new standard that's coming up for various different things like no human trafficking, et cetera, et cetera. So actually, we're happy actually with the fact that BCI doesn't have any label right now. That's fine for us. If we can tell the story in another way, like this video is on our website in our corporate social responsibility report. We call it sustainability and responsibility. It's actually on there, but it's not something that, unless the consumer goes to look for it, It's not something that's on the hang tag of the shirt or the pants. When you're ordering online, it doesn't say this product is made from BCI. We can tell the story, but it's not another label, at least not yet. And I really hope it never becomes just another diluted label that you don't really know what it is. Because that's not the point. I mean, the point is to help farmers, and the point is to reduce this huge amount of pesticide and chemicals that are in our primary raw material. That's the point. I mean, bottom line. Everything else can come as an added benefit. There were, I don't know what's left. Let's see. This is just a quick slide to show how quickly we're increasing our procurement of BCI year over year. So 2013, it was just really a drop in the bucket in terms of how much our global cotton procurement is. And it's just going up substantially every year. This just shows by country of origin where we're procuring it from. India was our biggest supplier of better cotton in the last year. Not surprising, India is the biggest producer of cotton in the entire world. So it makes sense. Surprisingly, you don't see the US on there. The US is the largest exporter of cotton in the world. But this is a process of continuous improvement. It's about helping the farmer, helping improve the environmental footprint of the cotton. So this doesn't really, it can't really apply very well to these huge corporations in the US that are using GPS guided tractors with laser guidance to spray their pesticides. We don't have a lot to teach them. This organization doesn't have a lot to teach them. So that's why there's no BCI in the US quite yet. However, there is plans to have BCI become a verification process of US cotton to ensure that they're using the right pesticides, the right chemicals, etc. And that's it.